right, we're going to transition to talk about one of our partners, Indian Point. There have been some developments regarding Indian Point, as you know, a major player in the future and trajectory of our district's financial future. I'd like to start the conversation with a reminder of who we are and how well we're doing. This is an infographic that we started publishing a number of years ago to really highlight some data points in our district that oftentimes, if not all the time, are never really published. They're not necessarily a third grade math score or a 11th grade U.S. History Region score, but this is really who we are, and this is what we're about. And what this graphic also talks about is what this district values. Certainly it values academic programs like we've heard tonight, but it values an investment in technology. It values a significant investment in giving kids extracurricular opportunities such as athletics, that when 60% of our eligible students between 7th and 12th grade are participating outside the classroom in athletics, that's a major investment with a lot of participation. It's money well spent. 95% of our elementary kids are playing an instrument. An average class size K through 5 of 19 per student. 23 advanced placement courses and 18 college level courses. So families who have kids in the high school or almost in high school, or those who recently graduated, are not just going to college with a couple college credits, they're going to college as a sophomore or a second semester freshman when they step foot on a college campus. So it's important that when we talk about what's at risk with Indian Point and why it's important in some of the tough decisions we have to make, we have to go back to data points like this so we know we're making the hard, right decisions. Almost 2 years ago, and we returned from our holiday break and come back from the new year, we will celebrate, I guess, Indian Point's closure, depending on your position on Indian Point. The short of it is we're going to lose $60.5 million in anticipated revenue. The top line is what Indian Point owed us through our financial contract with them, which is a pilot payment in lieu of taxes. And the red line is what we'll receive because of their closing over the next couple of years based on the reactor number 2 and reactor number 3. So we had a conversation when Indian Point closed because there were more questions than answers, but we talked about a multi-pronged approach of how we make up $60.5 million. And I'll talk a little bit about all of these. New York State has a power plant cessation mitigation fund. That's essentially a pot of money in New York State that all taxing municipalities can apply for. Taxing municipality includes a school district, town, village, you name it. So one of our approaches is to make sure that we are eligible for those funds and that funds in Albany will be able to take care of us based on our eligibility. Business development in the Hendrick Hudson community. We heard 2 weeks ago from a gentleman affiliated with the town of Cortland who's chiefly responsible for business development. There are some opportunities there. Why is that important? Because the more property we can develop, the more tax revenue we can generate on the tax rolls. So undeveloped property, well, sure, people may be paying property taxes. They're paying property taxes based on the value of undeveloped property. The goal, as you heard 2 weeks ago, is to try to develop in sensible and reasonable ways as much of that property as possible. There are bills in the House of Representatives sponsored by Nita Lowy. I'll talk about those in a little bit and the status of those. Last week, Linda Puglisi and I had an initial conversation with the top legislative aide for Senator Gillibrand's office. That conversation was about an hour, updating the Senator's office on all of our happenings, but as well as what we really need them to do to support us in the Senate. The good news is that there are communities throughout the country who are losing nuclear plants or have lost nuclear plants, and they're in red states, they're in blue states, they're in red districts, blue districts, purple districts. This is not a a Democrat or a Republican issue in Washington. It's a community issue. So Nita Lowey, who's our local congresswoman, happens to be a Democrat. She has co-sponsored a number of bills with Republicans who are going through the same, having the same experience that we are throughout the state, mostly in the Midwest. State Education Department, we know that we will receive an increase in state aid because as Indian Point goes offline and they're no longer a wealthy business, our property wealth ratio will reduce. And when the property wealth reduces, it's oftentimes supplemented by state education department dollars. We're anticipating that our state aid will go up as high as 31%, which will certainly help, but it's not going to close the $60.5 million gap. And lastly, district-led cost savings initiatives. I'll end this presentation with giving the community an update on what we're doing to tighten the belt. The Cessation Mitigation Fund currently has $45 million in it. In order to be eligible, you have to have a tax loss of greater than 20%, and it has to be a direct result of a power plant closing. This particular cessation fund in New York State feeds you grant money over 7 years. It starts with 80% of the loss, and then each year after reduces by 10%. The goal of this fund is not to be a permanent Band-Aid. The goal of the fund is to not have huge, crazy increases in your property tax increases. It's a way of weaning you off the pilot agreement or the taxes you were receiving from the power plant. So it's not supposed to be a one-to-one fix. New York State has made very, very clear their goal, and the way that this fund is written in law, is not to completely supplement tax loss. It's to weaken the blow to the community, but it's not a one-to-one fix because Entergy or Indian Point is a private company, and the state's position is, we have no responsibility to pay the debt that they're going to leave, but we will help you through this cessation mitigation fund. We've learned a couple things about this fund most recently. It's an annual appropriation, as I said, for 7 years, subject to budget approval. What that means is that every year our lawmakers in New York State have to fund that cessation mitigation program. They have to add new money to it through the budget process. So right now there's about $45 million left in that account, and a spoiler alert, our communities are going to need over $100 million in order to receive all of the aid that we're eligible for, right? So that's $100 million over a 7-year period. So that would go to the district, a little bit to the county, a lot to the district. We make up around 72%. So the school district, the town of Cortland, the village of Buchanan, as well as the library and fire district. But we're the big player. Business development, I won't repeat it. You can watch the meeting from 2 weeks ago. But in terms of what could impact our tax base, there are conversations about Indian Point selling off parts of their 240 acres that don't need to be used for decommissioning. We have riverfront development taking place, or the potential for it to take place in Verplank. The Cortland train station, if you've been to the train station, there's a lot of opportunity to develop some property there, as well as other parcels within the community, but not necessarily in our school district. The goal there is that it would hopefully create jobs and some sort of revenue stream to at least bring some foot traffic through our community that we currently don't have. There's a lot here on this slide. I'm not going to read it all to you, but these are bills that were introduced in committee last year. They are still alive and well. I had a conversation with Congresswoman Lowey's team as recently as yesterday. They're going to continue, they said, to work with the Energy Secretary, as well as the Energy Committee of Congress. Democrats picked up a number of seats in the House, so now a Democrat will chair this committee. Nita Lowey will be the incoming chair of the Ways and Means Committee. That essentially is the committee that negotiates the federal budget. So she has made a commitment on our region's behalf to make sure these bills become law, and that she advocates that they become law with her partners and colleagues in the Senate. What these all do in a different way is they create revenue. It essentially creates a revenue stream from the federal government to offset our costs of having a defunct nuclear power plant in our backyard. When a company comes in to decommission a nuclear power plant, it will take up to 60 years because of the life of the nuclear rods that are still housed on the campus. So for 60 years, you really can't touch that property. And our contention through these bills from the Congresswoman is, well, that property is worth something, while you people, go through your scientific process of decommissioning it. There still is some overhead costs, and there is an opportunity loss. The opportunity loss is redeveloping the property. So each of these bills, essentially, some call it a tax, some call it a fine. It's a way of creating federal revenue to all taxing communities that house a now defunct nuclear power plant, so long as there are nuclear rods on that site. And in the case of Indian Point and all nuclear power plants, when they go offline, they remain a inactive nuclear power plant because there's live nuclear material on the campus. So these different bills would create a revenue stream for us. I mentioned conversation with one of our senators. They're looking at a bipartisan approach, as I said earlier, because this is not just an issue in New York, it's an issue particularly in the Midwest. The senator is committed to a site visit with her team and a tour of our community so she can understand what's at risk. We hope that happens either with her or her counterpart Chuck Schumer. But it is certainly on their radar. That 1 hour telephone call we had on Monday was the most exciting response we received from the Senate yet. So hopefully that will materialize into some bills and some revenue. Talked about the State Education Department. State Education Department, well, whoops, that looks like that's just a different slide type. What we know from the State Ed Department, whoops, I brought the wrong one. What we know from the State Ed Department is they're going to review all of our financials, they're going to review the district's wealth ratio, all of these calculations that go into our property tax cap. Every year around February, March, and April, we talk about state aid going up, state aid going down, how much money are we getting. The good news, and this is not a political statement, but the good news is with one political party controlling New York State, and that particular political party campaigning on increasing school aid and increasing the school budget. In fact, there was just a call the other day for a $2.1 billion increase to the budget. That could bring good news for us, but we will see how that negotiation pans out. And the last piece of our financial approach is how do we look at our programs, how do we look at the business that we conduct. We're about a $70 million company, and how do we curb costs to demonstrate to our community that we're not just begging for free money. We're contemplating some very tough and difficult and maybe some unpopular decisions. A number of years ago, we looked at reorganizing and even to an extent outsourcing our transportation outfit. We had a consultant come in that looked at two things. Can we be more efficient with our bus routes? And would we save money by outsourcing our transportation department to a third party? Essentially not being in the business of having school buses or drivers that are employees, but it's a third party contract. We saved about $300,000 by rerouting some bus routes, taking some buses off the road, being more efficient. There was a drawback to that. The drawback was we had some more kids on a bus, and some bus runs got a little bit longer. But I'll tell you two stories. One, the bus run that got, after we rerouted the buses, the greatest increase in bus length went from 9 minutes to 13 minutes. And bus capacity, the greatest increase was one bus at Furnace Woods that went from 34 students to 51. Now, these are buses that fit 76 kids. We went from 34 to 51, and that, for $300,000, that was a significant, we received some significant feedback from particular communities about that. Kids are on the buses longer, and there's more kids on the bus, what are you going to do about it? So we realized that maybe not everyone was as informed as we would like or was on board with making some significant decisions in our operations, so we could reserve $300,000 to either go to our bottom line, to balance our budget, or you name it. So what we're looking at right now, and we should start with the bottom line, is we've worked with the New York State School Boards Association, who identified a consulting outfit, an educational consulting outfit that does this work for a living. And the work that they do for a living is they work with districts on how to be more efficient in a number of different ways. Popular ways, very unpopular ways, but there are people not affiliated with their school district. They don't live here, they don't work here. In fact, they live somewhere between Binghamton and Syracuse, and they just look at the facts. We don't engage with them. The board hasn't engaged with them. No one on our administrative team has engaged with them with the exception of just sending them documents that they want to review. And so throughout our last 2 retreats, our board is committed to looking at some cost centers. And these are 3 cost centers. Low enrollment in high school electives. We have programs with 5, 8, 10 kids. We have classes with 5, 8, 10 kids because we've made that commitment to support those programs. AP French, AP art classes, 4th and 5th level languages that may not be AP. We offer a lot of opportunities for our high schools, and they're going to look at that course catalog, and they're looking at current enrollment in all of our classes, but in particular our electives, and they're going to make recommendations to say, you might be able to do this more efficient. You may run your electives on an every other year rotation. You may have to have, we call planned abandonment. You may have to end a program over time because of low enrollment. Now, there are winners and losers in those conversations. We'll be able to put a dollar sign to some of those, but kids may lose or may not have the opportunities that they've always had because of the financial conundrum we're in. At the middle school, they're going to look at the current model of how the middle school is organized, 3 grade levels that operate in teams. They're going to help us determine if there are cost savings by abandoning or moving away from the team model in 7th, 8th grade and having more of a junior high model. The junior high model essentially is, it feels like a mini high school. They're not at the high school, they don't go to the high school, but the teachers are organized by content in 7th and 8th grade, not by team. For any of you who have had a middle schooler go through our district and many other districts, they're part of a team. The Snow Leopards, the Kelly team, the blue team, the green team, where teachers are responsible for anywhere between 80 and 120 kids. They co-plan, they talk about what's happening in the classroom, they talk about student support, they talk about field trips. The junior high model is essentially in 7th and 8th grade, teachers are organized by content. What are potential savings there? The savings are going to come in more efficient class sections. We do have teams in the middle school right now between 6th, 7th, and 8th grade with less than 15 kids. We right now are dealing with an enrollment valley compared to the grade levels that we were graduating over the last 4 years of around 200 kids. We're anywhere between 142 and 170. That comes with an opportunity or a responsibility to look at whether or not we can offer the same programs for kids, but have it look different or have it be staffed different without cutting those opportunities. The review will also look at state mandated programs and courses. We offer a boatload of opportunities for our kids in the middle school. You would be shocked at how little of those opportunities are mandated by the state. It's actually pretty pathetic. Art, music, technology, that's about it. And you take 3 years of math, science, English, social studies. The presentation we just heard, every single one of the classes that we just heard about Project Lead the Way are electives. They're not mandated by New York State. There's a cost to those, and the idea of doing this cost analysis is to put a dollar amount to it so we can make an informed decision of whether or not those programs or those areas are worth exploring or not. I'll go back to the transportation audit. We were able to make tighten the belt in a lot of areas around, as I said, bus runs, number of buses, those sort of things. When the conversation got to outsourcing our transportation outfit, the savings were not going to be worth the result. And that was pretty clairvoyant on all of our parts, because one district that shall remain nameless but is very contiguous to us, they outsource their transportation, and the company that they use went bankrupt. And the school district was asking us and other districts in the region for buses and bus drivers, and can we merge routes. So we decided then that while there may be savings, that's not what we're about, or that's not what we want to explore. And lastly, the third piece of the study is at the elementary school. Elementary organization, how we're organized. We have 3 elementary schools with grades K through 5. Elementary school A currently has 343 kids, elementary B has 413, and elementary C has 241 kids. Right now in kindergarten, in elementary A, there are 21 kids per kindergarten. If you happen to live in elementary school C, you have 17 kids in the kindergarten class. If you live in elementary B, you have 14.7 fourth graders in your class. But if you go to elementary C, you have 17 fourth graders. If you go to elementary A and you're a 5th grader, you have about 24 kids in your class. But if you go to elementary B and you're a 5th grader, you have 20. The way we're organized as an elementary division is based on where you live and when. And that has created a very, very inefficient model. We talk about that through the budget process. We budget to make sure we pay our bills, our contractual obligations, all of those things, and then we budget another $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 for additional teachers based on enrollment changes that happen in elementary schools after we secure our budget. We make a budget. The board blesses the budget in March, and we have kids moving into our district in October and November. So the big piece, and probably what will be the most popular in terms of attention, is going to be this piece around elementary. Do we redistrict to balance enrollment? Is one thing this district has done. You will hear, I'll say it, but you'll hear from the consultants, that's a short-term solution for a long-term problem. Because again, you're rolling the dice that your redistrict elementary zones are going to continue to have that many school-aged kids in it, so that you don't end up with one school with 413 and another school with 150 kids less. The last piece to the elementary organization is going to be, do we organize differently? And there are many different ways school districts have organized their elementary kids. They've done it by grade level, they've combined grade levels, they've done it where every child starts in one school and then they go back to home-based elementary schools based on where they live. Some districts, you start in your home-based elementary school and then you come together in 4th and 5th grade and then move on to the middle school, so on and so forth. The idea is, how do you balance these class sizes and some of the discrepancies I talked about with still being fiscally responsible? I started this presentation saying, it's wonderful, we have 19 kids in an elementary school, but if you're the parents of a 4th grader, well, no we don't, we've got 25. So the law of averages is nice, and that's a nice talking point. It's not my kid's experience. So the piece around the cost analysis at the elementary level is going to be about our outgoing costs to maintain what we've always had, or do we want to do something different to keep money either in the bank or to reduce the tax burden. This district has a long, long history about reorganizing or redistricting elementary. We now have a $60.5 million problem that these questions may help answer. We may say, you know what, no way, we don't have the support, or our community is willing to pay higher taxes to keep it the way it is. But we have to ask those questions, we have to turn those stones over, and we have to provide our community with that information to be able to make an informed decision. And speaking of staying informed, we have some web pages on our website where we dump all of our Indian Point info and intel. And shortly after Indian Point announced their closure, we had a number of parents come together to put together an advocacy, a non-for-profit advocacy group that is really able to say things and behave in a way that the board can't, and that people affiliated with our school district can't. But they have the ears of lawmakers, of various different organizations that are trying to help us solve these problems. This has not been this slide around getting consensus on the cost analysis. This has been a conversation the board has had for about the first 18 months after Indian Point announced the closure. And no one was happy about it. No one is looking forward to it. I know I'm not, because this is a very personal and passionate topic, any of these, because we've had our experiences as kids, our kids have had experiences, and the thought of doing something different scares people. And I think we have to acknowledge that. But the majority of our voters don't have, the majority of our residents don't have kids in the district. We have a responsibility to everyone, at least to ask the question, and then to see what people will say. So that's the bottom line on why we're going through this painstaking process. But will be very, very important, and will, I think, shed some light on questions for us to answer or opportunities for us to consider. That's our Indian Point update. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that probably the most difficult thing is going to be when we get into some of these discussions to just, I think everybody coming into these discussions has their personal viewpoints, and I think we all have to remember that we have taken an oath to uphold our fiduciary responsibility, as well as, putting our own knowledge forward. So I think that that's going to be one of the most difficult conversations that we have, because a lot of people really want to keep programs in stable condition, and, considering what we've just experienced with our presentations tonight, we have an award-winning program, and we want to be able to keep those award-winning programs for our kids. So.
The third-party analysis that you're speaking, has that been, have you determined who it is?
Yeah, so we work with...
Has it been started then?
Yes, yeah, we worked with BOCES all summer. We had the board commit to going forward with it in our retreat. We worked with the School Boards Association to identify groups that they have worked with on behalf of boards. So they have become a service that BOCES is providing, that actually other districts in our region are.
So BOCES is doing this analysis?
No, it's a consulting group, but under the BOCES umbrella. So it's an aidable service under BOCES. So we'll say 40% back on it. We'll get 40% aid back on it. They provided us a list of about 53 different pieces of information, data, you name it, that we've been sending them. All of our bus routes, everyone's salary.
Student.
Blueprint of the school, of every school and every classroom, the square footage. I mean, there's a lot of info that they have to manage in order to make the most accurate and significant
So you
recommendations.
provided this information to them, and they're currently pulling it all together, and you anticipated March-ish?
In the spring, yeah. I mean, we're at the
Spring,
point where
it could be
they're doing their
summer.
first blush. They're going to come down and spend a day or two to actually walk the building to say, okay, the blueprint says this. What is this? It says it's a reading room. You know, could it be a classroom or those sort of things. They've asked for everyone's schedules, so they have the master schedules of every teacher, every elective area, every music teacher at the elementary, everything.
Do they-
That has been the most laborious part is getting that to them and then doing follow-up questions.
Do they consider incendiary impact of the community? So, in other words, if you redistrict or you change how our community is organized, that could impact tax levies, right? Because the values of homes will change significantly, in which case you'll get challenges and your tax levies might go down in a certain community because that's related to a certain elementary school, right? So there are some other, tangential issues that they need to consider, not just the school impact.
Yeah, the communities, they've done these studies, they have advised on all of those matters, and that would be a conversation they'd end up having with Enrique or the town and the village to say, okay, what does this mean in terms of people then challenging their taxes, tax certs, and those sort of things.
And I want you to please emphasize to the public that none of these changes are going to be implemented without the public being able to voice their concerns and their opinions and, open it up to people being able to voice how they feel. And my second point is that none of these changes will be implemented for next year, because I think when I've spoken to PTA groups, that's been one of the biggest concerns. Oh my goodness, next year my child's going to be pulled out of a school. No, I really want to make that very clear.
Yeah, any change up on this list or any other ones that we learn that are of significance in terms of how kids are organized would take place no earlier than the September 2020 school year. Now that coincides with our first major reduction in pilot payments. So if we do anything different for the purpose of either reducing taxes or redistributing how we allocate our resources, it will coincide with the first day. I know we're on the brink of the holidays, and this isn't the most fun discussion to have, but we have been talking about it, and it's real, and it's not going anywhere. We're not getting in the mud with the rumors or innuendos of a bailout to Indian Point or what have you. If you've gone or watched any of the committee meetings, the task force meetings, Entergy, who owns Indian Point, is leaving. They have said that. Corporate has met with Enrique and I and said, we are out of here. If someone else comes in,
April 28th.
yeah, on April 28th next year. If someone else
No,
comes in,
2 years.
No.
or 2 years, I'm sorry, 2021.
Rushing.
If anyone else comes in, that's on them, or that's up to them. Entergy used to run the Fitzpatrick Nuclear Power Plant outside of Oswego on Lake Ontario. A number of years ago, around 2015, the governor then actually cut them a deal to to help Entergy sell Fitzpatrick to Exelon, a different nuclear power company. And he got killed, the governor got killed because he wanted to protect those sort of jobs upstate, but was chiefly responsible for closing Indian Point here for his reasons that he stated. So it's possible that someone else comes in to run the power plant. We don't hear about that. They're actually very, very good about keeping some of those, any truth to those rumors quiet. But Enrique and I have a direct line to their corporate office in New Orleans, and I feel we have a good enough relationship with them that they would tip us off, and there is no tipping. So We have to go forward as though this is happening and make decisions based on the best information we have, which is this. And if we get surprised, you know, we can do things differently, but this is what we know. That $60.5 million of tax revenue, if we made that up in just increasing everyone's taxes, it would be on average 13% tax increase each year for 5 years. And then that becomes the new baseline. So imagine your taxes going up 13%, and another, and then they stay flat. Then we make up 60.5 million and we're in the clear. But they don't go down. So that's what that's why we're doing this work, and we're advocating and calling people and going to meetings. But we can't rely on politicians to solve it. We have to look at entertaining different options to solve our own problem. You have.
Well, actually, I was asked by someone else, but I just had another one. We're planning on doing presentations, of course, at the different schools
Oh, sure,
about
yeah.
these costs, and just to make sure that everybody understands that
Yep.
we're coming around to them.
Okay. Other than that, Happy New Year.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation.